Welcome back. It's Maxine, your spiritual astrologer, sharing astrology in a more empowering and soul-centered way. And today I'm talking about some of my favorite book recommendations. If you are learning astrology, here are some of my top 10 books that I like to recommend as a professional astrologer myself, and also as someone who teaches others how to learn astrology inside of spiritual astrology school. These books are not only some of my favorite, whether you're a beginner, intermediate to astrology, or more advanced. I'm gonna kind of ramp up as we go throughout this episode, but they're also tried and true. So I've recommended these to countless people over the years and students, and they've just loved them and got so much out of them and reported back that they were happy that I shared these books with them. So I'm super excited to share these with you today. Again, I'll start with more beginner-friendly books, and then we'll ramp up to more intermediate astrology books and then more advanced topics. No matter your astrology level, there will be something for you in today's episode, I'm sure of it. Probably some astrology book that you'll want to get by the end of this, if not all of them. So I'm going to go through them one by one for you. If you want to get a whole list of all these astrology books rather than writing them down, I will link that both on MaxineLuthia.com, and I'll have them all in one place for you on my Amazon account page. So I've not done that before, but I was asked if I could do that just to compile a list of some of my favorite astrology books. So you'll find all of these there, as well as some of my others that are on that back shelf there and all throughout my apartment. And I do think I get a small commission if you get one of those books through my Amazon page, so thank you if you do that, but you do not have to. You can also just see them all there. So yeah, just to have them all in one place for you, really. Also, just keep in mind you want to be discerning when reading any astrology book. It's just so important that, for example, if you're reading about your chart, some interpretation, if it doesn't resonate, if it doesn't speak your truth, if maybe it feels negative or doomy, it's just so important that you read that with a grain of salt and you filter that, take it or leave it. Keep that in mind, because although these books are great, I wouldn't be recommending them if they weren't. I did not write them, so there's going to be some pieces that I myself don't even agree with fully, or maybe in your chart I would interpret that much differently from my approach to astrology, which is more empowering and spiritual and, you know, follows that evolution of your soul. So keeping that discernment in mind as you read these. Okay, so let's get into it. I'm so excited to share these astrology book recommendations with you. Again, I have 10. There were so many more that didn't make the cut, and I feel like they're just staring at me at the side here. So maybe I'll have to do a part 2 eventually. But my first astrology book recommendation for you, this one's more beginner friendly. It's one of the first astrology books actually that I got back in the day when I first started astrology, so it's very sentimental to me. It is called The Only Astrology Book You'll Ever Need, which is not true. You will need more astrology books, but it's a catchy title, and you do get a lot out of it. And this book is by Joanna Martine Woolfolk, and apologies in advance for all these authors if I say their names incorrectly, but this is such a great book, and as you can see, if you're watching on YouTube rather than the podcast version, it is a thick book. It reads like a textbook for getting into astrology, like an intro to really an overview of everything you need to know to really get into reading your birth chart specifically. So if you're interested in learning about your birth chart, aka natal chart, same thing, then this book is really great for that, especially learning more about the zodiac signs through the different planets. So learning about your sun sign, learning about your moon sign, your rising sign. It also gets into the other planets by signs, and learning about houses, learning about aspects, that kind of thing. It also touches on that too. So it really is this book that gives you an overview. It has been around for a while. It's been around since like the 1980s when she wrote this. And she does kind of have a relationship-oriented bent. You can feel that in the book, what she talks about, like compatibility stuff she kind of touches on too. And actually this is my second copy, so it is that good. I purchased it again. I had to donate the other one because it was too bulky to fit in the traveling library suitcases that we sent to Spain when we moved, but it is that good. And my first copy I just had highlighted all over. It did not look as pretty as this one, but that's a sign that you really like the book and you got a lot out of it. So I recommend this one. I remember when I first got started with astrology, it was such a great resource to look back on. And yeah, it's a great book. And then the second astrology book recommendation I have for you is also beginner friendly, but again, has so much info in it. If you know more astrology, you will not be disappointed. So this one is called Astrology, Using the Wisdom of the Stars in Your Everyday Life by Carol Taylor. And this book is just so thoughtful and it's so beautiful, the illustrations. I mean, look at that, so gorgeous. And even inside the book itself, it's so colorful and just visually appealing. And if you are a visual learner, you would love this book. I don't know if you can see that very well, but it's so well thought out and there's so much detail and knowledge packed into every page, so don't let the pretty illustrations fool you. You learn about all the basics like the planets, the signs, the houses, but I really like how she gets to the essence of each of them. You can learn so much in it and it's just so well organized. It's just very satisfying in that way. And then in the second half of this book, she has this thematic, practical application of astrology, showing you how you can use astrology in your everyday life. So how you can look to your birth chart or transits and understand different topics like health or career or handling disagreements, moving homes, or understanding parenting or taking a risk, meeting new people, relationships. So even if you are more intermediate in astrology, this is a great book if you want to start seeing how you can, practically speaking, apply astrology to your everyday life and understand how to look for that in a chart, where to begin. This really does a great job of breaking that down for you. And my next astrology book recommendation for you, whether you are a beginner or you're more intermediate, you're wanting a book to put it all together and read birth charts, is called The Inner Sky by Stephen Forrest. And this is an older copy, so yours might, what you find might be a little different if you go to my Amazon page where I have all these. But this is a really great book if you want to understand the basics of astrology. So planets, signs, houses, aspects, and begin to put it all together. He does a really good job too of giving more of that spiritual evolutionary astrology approach. For example, you'll learn about the 12 zodiac signs, but you'll understand both their shadows and their strengths. So you're seeing that there's choice when it comes to how you express your birth chart. It's not just, oh, you're Aquarius, so you're gonna act this way. And it really outlines that in greater depth to see how you want to express that. Your soul has a choice there. So of course, I really appreciate his approach to astrology that way. And if you're struggling to find a book that simplifies things without watering it down, this is a great book for you because he does that in such an eloquent way. He really makes it digestible, but again, without watering it down. And I feel like that just takes such a writerly talent. So I really recommend this book. And actually one of my favorite astrology quotes comes from this very book where Stephen Forrest says, quote, "Astrology is just a finger pointing at reality." So beautiful, so simplistic and true. It really shows you how astrology helps you in that perception of yourself, that self-awareness. So this book, it's a great one. And then that brings us to my next astrology book recommendation for you. And this is for you if you are, it is beginner friendly, but if you're more intermediate and you're looking to learn about a more topic specific book, then this book by Jan Spiller is a great one. It's called Astrology for the Soul. And it does just that. It's that same vein of spiritual evolutionary astrology where you're learning about the lunar nodes, the north node and the south node, and what that means for the journey of your soul's evolution. What are you here to leave behind? What is getting in your way? What fears might be there brought over into this lifetime? And then your north node, what are you here to lean into? Where do you need to get out of your comfort zone? What is it that you're here to contribute to the world? I have a whole episode about this. I'm not going to get into it here, but if you wanted to learn about that, you can check out that episode episode on the lunar nodes, past lives, reincarnation. And in this book, you'll read for where your lunar nodes are placed by sign, by house, and you start to understand what that means for you at that soul deep level. You can see it's a thicker book, so there's a lot on each placement. It's not just a little blurb. She goes in depth into all possibilities, and she talks in very practical terms too, which I love. So she'll talk about what it is that you're here to leave behind, what tendencies are holding you back, where it is that you want to make sure you're stepping into, what you need to be focused on, really what it is that your soul came here for. So this is one part of that puzzle, but a big, important one in a spiritual, evolutionary, karmic approach to astrology. So this book is really great if you're curious about diving deeper into that. And then my next astrology book recommendation for you is another one that's very near and dear to my heart because it was one of the first authors that I really got into astrology with, and that is Astrology, Psychology, and the Four Elements by Stefano Royo. And the subtitle here is An Energy Approach to Astrology and Its Use in the Counseling Arts. And this book, it's smaller, as you can see, but it is so densely packed with information. It is a bit denser to read, but it's so worth it, especially if you are interested in a more psychological approach to astrology, which all of these books that I've mentioned really do speak to. That's just part of what astrology is. But the whole first part of this book is talking about psychological astrology, how to use astrology in a way that's going to be really helpful and supportive. And then the second half of this book, it's more into that energetic, elemental approach to a birth chart, that psychological approach. As someone who teaches astrology, I find that one thing that can be lacking and making it difficult to blend things together is a larger thematic framework for what you're doing with astrology. How do you blend it all together? What are the common undercurrents? Going back to the basics, but from this more theoretical approach. So this would be that book for you if you're interested in that. Again, if you're more intermediate or advanced in your astrology, this could be a great one to come back to. It's just a great read if you're interested in that. So we're halfway through these astrology book recommendations, and I just want to pause to say that learning astrology through books is such a great way to deepen your knowledge. But if ever you feel stuck blending it all together, putting the pieces together, really feeling confident reading astrology charts from a spiritual perspective, then I'd love to invite you to Spiritual Astrology School. That is my comprehensive 6-month-long program to read astrology charts in a really soul empowering way. So our next round for that opens in September. If you want to check that out, you can go to maxineluthia.com to read more on that, feel it out. There's all sorts of information, testimonials from such beautiful souls there. And of course, if you have any questions, you can reach out to me. But you learn how to read birth charts, transits, and more all in one comprehensive in-depth program, all in one place over those 6 months together. So if you're interested, would love to have you join either this fall or another time in the future. Okay, my next astrology book recommendation for you is one geared toward a more intermediate, even advanced astrology student if you want to understand aspects a bit better. So this one's more topic specific, but it's called Aspects in Astrology, A Guide to Understanding Planetary Relationships in the Horoscope by Sue Tompkins. This book is great if you want to understand aspects more in depth, as you may have assumed, but she does such a great job of taking this complex subject of aspects, which I know gets so many students so tied in knots, and she simplifies it and she helps break it apart so you see that relationship between the planets and how it differs if it's a square versus a conjunction versus a trine. And part 2 of this book is called A Planetary Cookbook, where she actually goes through each of the different planet combinations and helps you understand how they relate to one another in aspect. So she'll go through the sun, okay, sun-moon aspect, sun-Mercury, what does that look like? And you understand essentially how that would come to life in a birth chart. So this is great, again, if you are a beginner to aspects or even you just want a refresher or want to kind of have a breakdown of what that looks like. My next astrology book recommendation to you is another topic-specific one. So if you're more intermediate, even advanced in your studies and want to learn more about the 12 houses, then I recommend this book. It's such a classic. It's called The Astrological Houses, The Spectrum of Individual Experience by Diane Rudyard. It's just such a great book to understand more deeply how the 12 houses, even where they came from, the why behind them. If you have a lot of questions about what are the houses and how do they relate to one another, how do they differ, this is that book that would help you with that. And he has such a great way of giving you, again, more of that theory behind the houses. In many of the other books I've mentioned, they do talk about the houses. That's one of the basics, fundamental building blocks of astrology, of any birth chart, for example. But here, he really gets into what they represent and how they all tie in together. And again, how they form this spectrum of your life experience. So I'll leave it at that, but it's a really great book if you want to deepen your knowledge of the houses. Okay, my next astrology book recommendation for you is also topic specific to transits. So this is definitely intermediate or advanced, but it's called Planets in Transits, Life Cycles for Living by Robert Hand. And you can see this one is thick. This one has a lot in it. And I don't know how he wrote this book because it is so detailed and extensive. So you can kind of see there, I mean, I've put in post-its, but there's even, I don't know if you can see on the side there, yeah, the sun sign, the glyph for the moon, Mercury. It's so cool because he goes through all possible transits in the chart. So you can use this book almost as a cookbook for transits, where if you're experiencing a transit, you want to know more about its interpretation, you can look it up in this book. And it gives you an overview of what that signifies for you, what you can expect, how you can work with these energies is more so how I approach it from my spiritual perspective of astrology, but you can understand what might be coming up for you. So this is a great book for that. Again, it goes through all the main planets. Unfortunately, it doesn't include Chiron, but otherwise it goes all the way to Pluto. Now, again, keep in mind what I said at the start. You want to be discerning as you read through this. That is not an exhaustive look at how it could manifest. And this is where a reading back and forth really helps you to see with a human on the other side, not just a book, what is coming up, and you can synthesize everything in your chart. But this is a great place to start if you are interested in transits and you want to understand what a certain transit planetary shift might signify for you and your birth chart. So yeah, great book for transits. Now my next astrology book that I'll recommend to you is also about transits and more. This is the book called Astrological Timing, Cycles of the Soul, Transits, Progressions, and Returns. And this is by Brian Clark. This is definitely more of an intermediate advanced level astrology book, and it reads a bit more dense. There is a lot of good information in this book. It's so packed full of basically an overview of everything you'd want to know about timing in astrology. So this book looks at, again, transits, the real-time movement of the planets, but also it gets into progressions and solar returns and planetary returns and just looking at all of these different planetary cycles of change. And I like how his perspective is more spiritual and less so predictive of this will happen, but more so putting context and meaning to what you're going through in life and understanding that a bit more. Honestly, I'm just so impressed how this author was able to take all these different timing techniques in astrology and somehow synthesize that into such a brilliant, comprehensive book on those topics. So if you are interested, and again, you are more intermediate to advanced in astrology, then definitely check this one out. Last but not least, I have one more astrology book recommendation for you if you are more intermediate to advanced in your astrology practice, and that is Astrology, Karma, and Transformation. The Inner Dimensions of the Birth Chart is the subtitle. And this one is by Stephen Arroyo as well. This one I have read, I mean, if I you can probably see it's just full of highlights and underlines. I've read this book at least 5 times now, front to back. It's such a good one. Look at that, it just looks like a rainbow. But with this book, I just, again, appreciate his spiritual approach to astrology and how he really honors the growth-oriented, transformative journey that a soul takes in this lifetime. And he talks about how that shows up in a birth chart, but also even transits and aspect. He really zooms in on Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, Pluto, and how those show up in the chart. Again, seeing more of that evolutionary perspective come through. So yeah, he does a great job on that. And again, even though the subtitle talks about the birth chart, he does get into transits as well. And I just love how he just dives into so many diverse topics in one book. 10 out of 10 recommend as well. So those are all 10 astrology book recommendations for you. Again, going from more beginner-friendly astrology books to more intermediate books to more advanced astrology books. And I'll have all of those linked all in one place for you on my Amazon page. So if you're interested in checking that out, I'll put that in the show notes, or also you can go to my website, MaxineLuthia.com. And I'll also include other bonus ones that I wasn't able to get to in this video. Let me know if any of these astrology books sparked your interest. I'd love to hear if you want to get one of these, which one your pick would be. And let me know if you have any astrology book recommendations for me. I love to hear what others' favorite astrologers, authors, books are. Maybe a book that really was a big part of your journey. So feel free to comment those over on YouTube so everyone can see them and we can share our favorites. I'd love to hear that. Honestly, I feel like I need to do a part 2 to this because I have so many more that I want to share with you. But again, I'll add those over on my Amazon page, so you can check that out too if you're interested. And again, if you want to check out my website for more ways to learn with me, to book a reading, to get my free astrology basics guide, or sign up for the waitlist to SAS, all of that is over on MaxineLuthia.com. Yeah, I'm so grateful that you listened to the end. Thank you for learning astrology with me. It's such an honor, truly. I just love teaching this stuff and the beautiful souls that I get to connect with. So thank you for being here. And yeah, until next time, take care.